Welcome to the Inside Lounge fireside chat with visitor attraction executives leading with data. In this very first episode, we're heading to Melbourne for a story that's as bold as it is brilliant. It's called Pass and Go, starting strong with data at Monopoly Dreams. I'm joined by Sophie Webber, GM of Monopoly Dreams Melbourne, an immersive game to life experience based on the world's most iconic board game. With the venue still in its early years, we'll explore what it really takes to open a new attraction, test assumptions, build baselines, and make data part of the DNA from day one. Sophie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Pierre. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Melbourne, a city of 5 million inhabitants, thereabout, right? 20% of
Absolutely,
the
our largest capital now. Yeah.
20% of the Australian population in Melbourne.
And everyone comes for the weather. Um, no, we are a city of events, attractions, food, and wine. And it's a really thriving city centre. I think, unlike perhaps the city of Sydney, for example, where it's very busy Monday to Friday, but not necessarily a destination because of the harbour, the Opera House, etc. Melbourne City itself is a destination, and it's home in the inner suburbs to things like the Melbourne Grand Prix at Albert Park, the MCG, of course, Rod Laver Arena at the tennis centre, not very far away, and they're all within 2 or 3 kilometres of the heart of the city. So Melbourne itself is a real destination, and that was a really big draw card when um, we were deciding where to launch Monopoly Dreams.
Yeah, interesting. It's also there's also a very strong coffee culture, right, in Melbourne?
Absolutely. Coffee culture, laneways, and shopping are also part of the DNA. It's a city that appeals to everyone. I've been working in tourism now for about 9 years, and I'm a very passionate Melburnian and advocate for our state. Um, Big fan of Queensland, of course. And what's really great, I think, is when we were launching the attraction, there was also another hub on the outer skirts of Melbourne at Docklands that was also quite enticing. The concept really came together off the back of an experience that was launched in Hong Kong, the very first Monopoly Dreams experience. And you think for a board game that is 90 years old this year, that there would actually be more experiences dedicated to this beloved family game. There is a Monopoly Life Size in the UK that is set to open in Denver this year or early next year. And then we're the second Monopoly Dreams and the only one in Australia.
Interesting. I remember losing a few friends when playing Monopoly. Hopefully, uh, hopefully it's not the same at the venue, right? I mean, yeah, Monopoly is great. Tell us a little bit about the setup that you have.
Definitely. So, unlike the Monopoly Life Size in the UK, Monopoly Dreams is really an interactive space, like an indoor play centre that is dedicated to and inspired by that beloved board game, as you spoke about. I will tell you one thing, in our house, you can flip the board, and we do encourage people to really ignite their passions. We know that Monopoly is all about winning, it's all about owning it all. And so, we have a lot of games that are physical, they're interactive. We also have some screen-based games, so it really appeals to all sorts of different play patterns. But the main thing is you accrue points and you race against the clock in many of them. And most recently, we also introduced leaderboard technology because of this passion people have for winning when it comes to Monopoly. We're situated in the heart of the city at Melbourne Central in the lower ground floor. And what's really interesting is Melbourne is an event state, as we talked about, or a city. And I have so many people ask me whether or not we're a permanent installation or a pop-up, because quite often, and right now, there's a Star Wars exhibition at Melbourne Museum, there's a Harry Potter experience that's here for a limited time. And then you've got your stayers like Sea Life Melbourne, Lego Discovery Centre, etc. So we're often saying to people, because it feels conceptual, an experience based on a really a cultural phenomenon being the Monopoly board game. It's one of the biggest things I have to answer is no, we are here to stay. And in fact, if all goes well, we're looking to expand into other states and even into New Zealand.
You mentioned you're here to stay, and I'm curious to know, since you've opened, have you changed any part of the interactivity of the game at all? Like have you had to adapt since you opened?
Yeah, great question. So I've been with the business since September of last year, and we officially opened our doors in November the year prior. What we found, we opened with a bang. We were the new kid on the block, and there was a huge amount of demand and excitement for the experience. I think what people really wanted was the gamification. So I wanted to feel like a Monopoly board, even though you're walking around an interactive experience in a really expansive footprint. It's 1,700 square meters, so it's a huge space. When we first started, we had an engagement with Monopoly Money where people could earn Monopoly money and then use that to buy things in retail and things in our cafe. So not only do we have an attraction, we actually have Monopoly's global flagship store where there's all bespoke merchandise and the biggest range of board games you're ever going to find. And then we have also a themed cafe that is a board game cafe where people are encouraged to come in, have a bite to eat, and play their favorite game all while dining. So it's pretty fun. When we first started, Monopoly Money was a big draw card, but we soon started to hear complaints from guests who were saying it doesn't seem to be worth a lot. The translation, I mean, I think people often talk about Monopoly Money a little bit tongue in cheek. If someone's spending a lot, they're spending it like Monopoly Money. So we looked to sort of reimagine what that looked like. And what we found was people loved the elements of the game that were familiar to them. They love rolling the dice, they love getting their property cards, and they love the money. So we had to reimagine how we introduce that again after taking on board the feedback where people were frustrated about the value equation. Um, as someone who started her career in FMCG marketing, I really grew up on data-led decision making. So between customer insights, consumer insights, and data, we really needed to use all of those data points to create our strategies. And I transitioned into tourism about 8 or 9 years ago, and I've been astounded by the fact there wasn't a lot of data. So when I joined the business, a lot of the priorities for me was really listening to the guest feedback. That was a data point that we perhaps had underutilized. So we did a lot of reflection and listening. And what we heard from our guests was value for money was really important. And you can imagine at this time where Australia is going through a cost of living crisis, not unlike the rest of the world, people are more discerning with their money than ever before. So really nailing that value proposition was really key. Making sure there was plenty of real-time connection to the board game they love, because that is the draw card of coming in. And just making sure that it was fun and it really appealed to lots of different age groups without being great for everybody, but not good for a specific target audience. So that's always a delicate balance, I think, particularly from a marketing perspective. If you talk to everyone, sometimes you don't really connect deeply with people. So we use that data to start with to really reimagine, to answer your question, what was working and what wasn't. And I think, when you're at year two of a startup, you've got to have that reflection time and really look at what do people love? What are people saying? What do we love? And then most importantly, where are we going next? So the last sort of 9 months have been a really big journey of evolution. We know the base concept is great. The demand is there. And then it was about how do we make it feel fresh and fun to invite people back again? How do we lean into some of those amazing cultural moments and sporting moments that are so synonymous with Melbourne? For example, the Grand Prix. A lot of people may remember and know that the very first suite of tokens included a race car, and that was in 1935. So during the Melbourne Grand Prix in March, we had messaging going out that we've been racing cars since 1935 to create that affiliation because Monopoly is part of popular culture. So being able to flex in and out was also a key learning that we heard from our guest feedback and really went to apply that. So I think an openness to change, an openness to evolve, and the importance of not throwing out the baby with the bathwater is a really important lesson when you're in that startup mind. And always remembering that our guests are forever changing and motivations are different. So just making sure we communicate in a way that's akin to how people are thinking and feeling.
I love that you mentioned that, and I think it's almost a blessing to be a new venue and to be able to adapt so quickly, right? Like if you think of institutions that have been around for decades, it may be a lot harder to shift, right? How they operate, what they have on display, what sort of content they have. And you've met Angie before, CEO, and we did a podcast earlier about growth, right? And how you attract more people. And my key take was that, you know, people now want more fresh content, right? Like they want new content. And as you mentioned, they want a different reason to keep coming back to that specific attractions. I know you guys have the experience, but you're also hosting birthday parties and so on, right? So you have multiple touch points to bring people back to Monopoly Dreams.
Absolutely. And one of the most fascinating things for me when I joined was our school excursion program. So Monopoly is where a lot of kids first learn to count. They understand the value of money. They start to work out mortgage percentages because if someone lands on their property, they need to tell them how much they owe them. And so really recognizing that opportunity, we partnered with an educator who created Victorian curriculum aligned workshops and programs, one on humanities and one on maths, that have gone gangbusters for us. Maths in particular is a real challenge, I think, in a lot of school communities where it doesn't seem that sexy, it doesn't seem that fun. So being able to bring the kids to a school excursion at Monopoly Dreams really brings maths to life in a practical sense, and it's also the board game they've likely played. So we offer school excursions for grades 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And really excitingly, this year we've just launched senior school excursions that are more about operations and marketing. As a lifelong marketeer before I stepped into general management, I would have absolutely loved the opportunity to see marketing in real life. And you see how it's applied in the workplace, and that you can have serious jobs in really fun environments. Because I think often when you're in the school environment, certain paths are quite linear and perhaps don't seem that exciting to younger people. So school excursions has been a really big part. And the other insight that we've really tapped into is corporate team building. So, another time in my career, I had the pleasure of working at Mattel, and we talked about the power of play and how important it is at whatever age. And you think about if I know you're a parent with young kids, being able to play and see your kids play, they're learning while they're doing stuff. It's it's what we all need to make our lives more fun. And I think in the corporate space, there's a lot of pressure because of the commercial situation we're in with the economy, that being able to bring to life those corporate messages, do the team building, and have fun is a really exciting opportunity for us as well. One of the key things that I think is sometimes a little bit undercooked is the power of the token. So I mentioned the relativity to the racing car, but we often use the tokens for team building experiences when you're trying to do icebreakers. There's a very interesting psychology, and whilst I'm not a psychologist, but behind why people choose certain tokens. I mean, Pierre, what token would you select if you were playing?
I'm not sure. I think I usually go with the little dog, whatever breed.
Scotty?
Yes.
Yep. I think
So,
Scotty is the number
so
one
who am I?
favorite.
Who am I? Sophie? Tell me.
You're lovable, you're a good friend, you're an honest companion, because that's what Scotty is to Mr. Monopoly. It's his beloved number two. Um, depending on your age and what board game you had, and quite often with Monopoly, certainly the one I grew up with, I wouldn't be surprised if my parents didn't get it for a wedding present or similar, because it was very aged by the time I came along, and it had a lot of the original tokens. So my brothers would always go for the boot, the top hat, or the battleship. And then I was loath to ever go near the iron. And the iron has since been retired, I think, due to popular culture, and probably it's not really a token that anyone desires to have. So I think just really recognizing other commercial opportunities and different ways to connect has been really important. And then that helps us with our targeting. by being able to flex the experience a little bit. And as you said, birthday parties are a great offshoot as well for us, where bringing kids into an experience is not uncommon for certainly in primary school birthdays. And our location makes it so easy. So a lot of parents, if the kids are old enough to be left without supervision, but left with one of our party hosts and usually the birthday person's parents. It's right in the shopping centre, so mum or dad can go for a shop. We're right on the train line. Melbourne Central Station is 200 metres from our front door, and it's all undercover. The free tram in the middle of the city runs right past our door as well, and then also there's car parking underneath. So there's lots of fun stuff. And just as a sidebar, which you may not know about, Pierre, we've just launched a free parking promotion this June, being able to use one of the icons of the game as well. So it's quite easy to lean into these elements to make it fun, but also appreciating that for people who are feeling economic pressure, coming into the city might be a really big thing. It's also winter in Melbourne, that if we can throw in some free parking, all of a sudden it becomes really attractive.
You know what? I love that you mentioned that because you've seen the benchmarks that we have in the exhibit, right? And the different benchmarks that we have. And when we collected those benchmarks, on the voice of the visitor topic, parking fees were actually amongst the top complaints, right? That we see across all institutions, right?
Yeah,
And when you think about it, what I hear a lot is, oh, but our venue, whatever that may be, is free. We have free entrance, and these guys are paid. And my argument has always been, well, going somewhere is never free, right? So you either taking your car, you're taking the transport. So I think what you're mentioning here is that you almost breaking down the barriers of accessibility, right? Like whether you're taking the public
absolutely.
transport that's free, whether you're offering free parking, etc. You're breaking that accessibility barrier to make it, to make it more accessible, essentially, for people to come, right?
Absolutely. And it's also part of that value add piece, right? So again, I don't know if we're getting into talking about the decision to work with you guys, but when I came out of FMCG marketing and into tourism, I've always been, quite dismayed when I join new businesses or different industries, and there's such a limitation of when it comes to data to make decisions. So often you'll have ticketing data, and you might have this year versus last year. I worked in ski as head of marketing for Falls Creek, and I would have retail data, rental data, etc. And I was able to get a bit of competitive data because we were owned by a group that also owned Mount Hotham. But it was quite simplified and not particularly sophisticated. And when I came into Monopoly Dreams, understanding that we have a ticketing platform, we have a retail platform, we have a food and beverage platform, um, how to really bring all that data together, and particularly in a general manager sense, was becoming really challenging because it all wasn't really connecting the dots and it was very manual. Shortly after I joined, I was introduced to UPR and Dexibit that had already been signed on by our marketing lead. And it's really transforming our business and helping our team have greater ownership of their area of expertise in their remit. No one has to now rely on finance to pull reports. They're sitting there available for everybody to use and everyone to look at. And I think it's a real game changer because I grew up using AC Nielsen with pre-formatted reports, very strong data integrity, a really flexible way that you could use charts and graphs and tables if you wanted to tell your brand story. And whilst in early doors in tourism, not having data can also be a marketer delight because it's more about using your instinct and your creative vision and less about the nuts and bolts of data to try things. Being able to bring the best of both, your gut feel coupled with your data to really validate what you're doing. And in startup life, and as I said, this is year 2, it's a really important time to make sure that we're testing and learning as we go. And the best way to understand whether something is a success is being able to actually look at the results. And I also love that Dexibit not only has those competitive or industry insights, we're also able to connect our Google Analytics and things like that. So we're much more transparent with our data. It's all in one place, and then it's therefore much more accessible. So it's really it's been really exciting for us to work on.
I like how you mentioned accessible again, right? I think that's like one of the key to data, right? Is that you are probably working with some people that are really heavy data users and that are really tech savvy. And then on the other side, you have people that are not really data users, but they may be data consumers at very surface level, right? So how do you build something that's being able to cater to everyone, make sense to everyone, as well as providing them insights for them to justify a change or to see that something needs to be changed, right?
Definitely. And I think we use a different program for our retail and cafe numbers, and it can be quite tricky to get the data out, as you well know. Where I've been able to use that data in the dashboard through Dexibit is, sitting down with the retail and merchandise team, and they can tell me what they think the best sellers are, but now we can see what the best sellers are. And when we first opened in November last year, we made a commitment to a whole lot of bespoke merchandise. And sometimes it's tricky to work out what sold well, what hasn't sold well. But we're at that point now where we're starting to reorder. We've transformed our product mix, if you like. We've really realized that the board game is key. And even if Big W, which is not far away in the center of the city, and Kmart is quite close, promoting Monopoly at a very low price, people want the guest experience of coming to that unique flagship store, and what else can you buy with your board. It's not necessarily about the cheapest price for everybody. And then from a cafe perspective, we have a range of food available, from hot food to hot drinks to cold drinks to desserts. And then we have chefs that are in our kitchen. Being able to use that data and see how it's presented in a very easy to understand visual way is really helping me facilitate conversations with the team about rosters, about prioritization, about how much of a certain cake we should make versus how many burgers we're expecting to cook. So then you've got some really big commercial implications there, where it comes down to rostering, so wages, and also your supply chain. And what's been really great is I work with a lot of very, very young people who potentially have never seen this kind of data before. So being able to sit down with somebody and explain why they're not getting shifts or why we're prioritizing a certain type of product, it's really helpful because they can see it and they understand it really easily because it's so visual. And I think, whilst there are people who have a knack for data. When you're working with a younger staff group, this is a real opportunity to set that groundwork, like people did for me when I first started in FMCG, where, the sales promotion comes in, sales ideally go up, and things like that. Sales go down, what's happening? Well, let's see what competitors are doing, that kind of thing. You need to learn how to look for those trends and what do those trends mean, and then therefore how do you turn that into action. So being able to have a universal platform with greater accessibility that we share with the team for them to take greater ownership is really changing the conversation, if you like.
I've, I like how you mentioned, dealing with people that are quite young in the workforce that may have never seen that as such type before. It almost is the same with like the reverse, right? Like people that have been doing it for ever and have never seen this data before, and they have the same sort of reaction, right? You have two reactions. One is we've been doing well so far without looking at that data. We don't need to see that data. And then you have the crowd that are like, wow, how did we not have this before? And that's really game changing, right?
It really is. And one of the things that blew my mind coming into this business is we spend a lot of time with our reporting looking retrospectively at the prior week or the prior month, and we didn't spend a lot of time looking ahead. So with your help, we've been able to get some really strong visual charts that show our pre-bookings. I was in a meeting yesterday and we had a fantastic long weekend. We know that school holidays and long weekends are when everybody comes out to play, which is fantastic. And then our midweek business is really focusing on the school excursions and corporates, as we spoke about. Being able to show the data to the team in real time is really exciting, but then being able to oscillate and say, let's have a look at what's in the pipeline. What have we got secured? What type of business? So, as you well know, I've become a very big fan of the stacked bar chart. But being able to talk to the team about, look at, Carl, he's booked all these schools in, and look at, marketing, they've got all these leisure guests coming in. There's a real sense of then ownership and a reward for all the hard work. And I think that is also a game changer for us that there's the here and now results of what, happened today. And our operational team are very focused on today. But being able to have that line of sight, and now we've gone out to 3 months worth, it's really, really fantastic. So it really helps give marketing. And certainly when I sat in the marketing chair, for me, I was always like, okay, well, can we, impact change in the next week, or is it next month that we're targeting? And then therefore, what should our messaging be and what sort of activity should we be doing? And so, that future-proofing our business is also the power of having the reporting. And I just think when you start bringing it to life with colors and different charts, it becomes more accepted because most people are visual learners, I've found.
Mm. I love that you mentioned that. It's not just you. I also like I love these graphs, by the way. Yeah, they're my default because it sort of gives you an idea of it, if you're tracking goals, if you're looking at a forecast, or if you have a forecast, you may think, oh, wait, we are, slightly behind.
Yes.
Maybe because, the month is simply shaped differently from last year, or depending on what your goals were set, they may be set monthly, and you're like, oh my God, we are halfway through the month and we're behind. But you may see the next 2 weeks, and you're like, well, actually, we've sort of front loaded ourselves on the
The
trend data,
phasing thing, yeah.
and the schedule for later. So I think I like how you mentioned that. It's really, yeah, it's super important.
It is, and I think you'll probably get embarrassed now, Pierre, but I've worked with a lot of different data suppliers in my time, but I have not worked with an account manager who is so easy to work with. And you're very generous with your time, particularly when we were trying to make Dexibit our universal point of truth, if you like. Um, Being able to assist with some of the translation of code between, the raw data that's spat out from a particular data source has been incredibly helpful. And just there's a lot of efficiencies there because we've invested the time up front. And I know even I sent you a request yesterday, and you've already come back to me on it about could I mash this report with that report to get a month view, what's in the bank and what's yet to come, because to your point, we know what our monthly target is. And, I don't think it was even 24 hours, and you'd come back going something like this, and, you've nailed it. And that attitude and the pace at which you respond to things is really exceptional. And that's what's made it such a joy for us, because as we're trying to evolve our reporting to make it more meaningful, more real time, more future focused, sometimes you don't know until you start using the reports whether they're going to be effective and tell the story you need to tell. And I've got,
Mm.
as you can imagine, stakeholders and shareholders who are very keen to see this information. And I'm, as a leader, very transparent with things. So the more straightforward I can make the reporting that they can look at themselves, that's why we have shared logins with our shareholders. I want them to feel empowered so we're not hiding anything, so they can celebrate our successes when they can see that pipeline filling up really nicely. And that accessibility is just as important for, your top end shareholders who are generally used to seeing reports, to our ground staff who are perhaps never seeing it for the first time, and we're all speaking the same language.
Yeah, I love that, and thank you so much for the feedback. By the way, it's amazing to get that, and to get it again. It's great, and I think it's sort of, being on the other side of, of the coin here on our side is sort of something that we don't really market heavily in terms of, hey, look, like we are very proactive, we are here with you. It's hard because I don't know, like, if you've had like an experience like that before, as in, we're not really consultants, we don't work for your business, but when you need something, we're here, we're proactive about it, we know, what we are talking about, we know how you should be looking at certain data points. And I think that just accelerates, one, the adoption, but two, also the trust in the data that you're getting, right?
Absolutely. When I worked in FMCG, we would have a Nielsen rep who would come once a week and sit in our business. So that was pretty special if you just couldn't quite crack the code yourself. But I think certainly as a new leader in our business, and being able to really set up reporting that is going to enable me to tell the story very well to my team is really important. But I think it it would be worthwhile for you to share that. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I better look at the contract because I'm worried how many hours of your time. Um, and you've never mentioned that once. And that in itself is really refreshing because I can see the commitment of your putting the investment of time in upfront. And if anyone from Dexibit is listening, hopefully it's not excessive for Pierre. But I think we've also nailed it in the sense of, I will send you an email that's quite detailed, potentially with screenshots and requests. And the way you communicate back is, you tick, this has been done, find that there. That in itself is also very empowering for me. It's very, very clear. I know where to go and look. And then it sort of takes away some of that back and forth because that communication, we've worked out the flow for ourselves. But I can really see that the investment that you put in time upfront to get it right, it's just going to pay off time and time again because once your data suite is set up as you like it, you're off to the races.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's for us, it's also important because we want to ensure that you're looking at data the right way and they tell you the right story, right? I think probably in other industry and with your experience, you probably come across that you have a specific data set, you're looking at data in a specific way, and it tell a story that you think it's true, but if you adjust your data slightly or if you make a change, it actually tells a completely different story. So that's also really important, right? To ensure that you're looking at it the right way with the right parameters. So it's, you're building your story along the line, and it's actually the correct one, which would make
Absolutely. And I sound like when I'm saying building the story, that I'm trying to like be an illusionist, and this is the marketer in me, I think. But the reality is, it's also being able to use data to make those right decisions. And as I said, if I'm down to how many pastry chefs are we scheduling in a week and what days of the week are they coming into the cafe, it's because the data tells me that we sell more desserts in the back end of the week than we do at the start of the week. So being able to make decisions from the data is really, really key. But likewise, looking at the data in a way that you've got some flexibility on how you cut it. So I think the different time frames are really important. We had an interesting conversation about forecasts, and the Dexibit data is on a fixed week from Monday to Sunday. So, even that education piece, when you sometimes pull weekly reporting, for the month, well, it's day one for June was on a Sunday. So that is week one, it's only one day. So then it's like, well, weekly reporting isn't really going to work there. So let's do the daily report and then we can put our own, line breaks in or something like that. So I think being able to have the flex to also play around with the data a little bit, to your point, check and balance what you're seeing and making sure that you're putting your best foot forward, but also not putting an artificial foot forward. But really using it to make those future decisions. And I think, back to your very first question, from being a startup, what have you learned? What have you still got in play? It's about looking at all of those data points and then making a recommendation based on what you see. And if we believe that something is brilliant and we're not getting that cut through with our consumers, then maybe it's just the way we're delivering it. So then it comes back to, are we doing the right training with our team? Do we have the right people in the roles to start with, that kind of stuff? So, old habits die hard with, it's a marketer who's very commercial who loves data. But I think the biggest plus for us is it's all in one place. Everyone can have access to it. And whether you're a seasoned campaigner or, someone who is in their first job, it's understandable. So therefore it makes it really accessible for everyone.
awesome. There's one more thing that I wanted to chat about, if you don't mind, and that I think we spoke about the experience and how you tailor that from the start to now, how you've made changes. You've also tailored the retail and the F&B offering. And one really strong topic that we are coming across right now in 2025 is growth, right? And part of that is sort of third party, ticket vendors. So your
Mhm.
agents, I think we call them here.
Yep.
Have you been able to get some data from? I know you've been able to get some data from that because I looked at the data. But
And
based
have
on
you
that,
noticed it's starting to really kick up?
yes, exactly. So, based on that data, like, what sort of conversations do you have with these people based on the data that you get? And, you know, are you like, we can increase the performance doing this and that? Like, tell me a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, what's really interesting is Monopoly Dreams and these kind of themed experiences seem to be resonating very strongly with certain cultural groups and age groups. So Melbourne Central itself, the whole shopping centre is really targeting your sort of 15 to 22-year-olds, if you like. The location is very central to universities. You've got Swinburne and I think RMIT just nearby. The State Library is on that one side of the shopping centre, across the street. So what we've really found is leaning into certain cultural groups, and the Southeast Asian cultural groups are very prominent in our target audience, but also what we see within the vicinity of Melbourne Central. So therefore, using those insights, we've then been talking to agents who are specialists in those areas. So we know right now we're coming into the northern summer, and for Japan, Singapore, China, etc., this is a key time of travel. So we're really leaning in hard and working with those partners and really dialing up the gamification and the fun and the collectibles of what we're offering in retail because we know that strikes a chord with that type of consumer. And it's really using the different agent partners at different times of the year, depending on who they specialize in, is really, really key. So, again, it's data and insights, right? Being able to work with these agents to say, okay, right now I can't go and be talking to individual travel agents that are based in Singapore and Japan. However, I can partner with a third party agent who that is their network. And so they do the marketing for you. And I think being very deliberate about that and really having more of a matrix style approach when it comes to your visitation, your growth goals, and things like that, and then just partnering with the right people. Tourism is one of the most incredible industries to be part of. People are very generous with their time. I often will spend time with other attraction GMs, people who've been in the industry a lot longer, and there's always a lot of shareability. And as I've said to you, I'm happy to talk to anyone about the gains we've made, whether it be through data or other insights, Yonder that we use for our guest reviews, for example. Because you need to really, it does take a village, and it's all about how you have tactical partnerships to help deliver your growth, but they also need to be measurable. So then being able to pull that data again into Dexibit is that transparency and create those agent reports. And what's been really great is we can look at, the short and the long-term view. So how do they play at certain times of the year versus others? And to help identify which agents to target right now, for example, is looking at how much did they sell last year. And then if they wane with their sales, well, let's find out why. And often it's because their target audience are not traveling to Australia at that time. So that's been really interesting for us as well. And what I love is just as GM having one place that I can see all that data at once. And as I mentioned when I was in our management meeting yesterday, being able to have the dashboard open on the screen and oscillate between that and our presentation deck is really helpful. So in real time, you can show people what to look for. And so that in itself reiterates the power of the data when we're presenting to both our shareholders and our team about we're all looking at the same thing.
Interesting. All right. Then you talked about us being generous with our time, but you've been extremely generous with your time as well here.
My pleasure.
And the last thing I'll be keen to know is if I was to open a visitor attraction tomorrow, what would you tell me?
I would tell you to talk to the alumni of people who have been doing it and just be a sponge. I think an openness to share. As I said, this is a really unusual thing. I've worked in very competitive environments in other industries that you would never dream of, and it would certainly be frowned upon. But in this industry, there's a real sharing mentality, and the view is that if we're all working together, we're going to bring more visitors to our wonderful state, our city, etc. I think the main thing is, obviously do your homework, really be aware of the macro and the micro trends happening in your environment. Like, unfortunately, when we were first trying to get this off the ground, it was due to open in 2020, and obviously COVID hit. So there was a big delay there. And so that obviously protracted a lot of things and then put a lot of commercial pressure on, where there was a lot of costs that were outlaid and the revenue wasn't able to come until a little bit later. And there's going to be stories like that in all industries, no doubt. But if you're opening something new, I think it's do your homework, be really proactive and talk to people in the industry to gain insights. And if you've got a good idea, go for it, because my last business, I worked in like luxury hotels and premium products, and I still believe there is money around. I believe that people would prefer to spend money on experiences than perhaps more stuff. And I feel like people are just a lot more discerning. So the value proposition is really, really important. The price tag, of course, but if it's value for money, people will come. And just, little things like understanding that Melbourne Central has a car park underneath, to your point about the barriers, going with a problem-solving mentality and removing barriers. And, we're really lucky that the free parking idea is on our game board, so we can really bring it to life in an authentic way that then reiterates the connection to the game.
I love that. I love that. Any final thoughts or golden nuggets that you want to share before we wrap up?
I think and this is probably from my marketing background, I think trust your gut, trust your instinct with anything you're doing. The data will only take you so far, and it's only a reflection of the inputs. But when you have a great idea, I think there's so many other things you need to consider, and that micro and macro kind of environment. But being able to trust your gut and your instinct. And I really admire our owners, our directors. They saw an opportunity and they've gone for it. And I think that belief in what you do is just so important. And just don't stay stagnant, whatever you do. I think I always bring it back to the fact that as consumers, of which we all are one, we're always evolving. So as a business, if you don't evolve too, you risk disconnecting with the very people you're trying to talk to and entice to come and visit. So evolution is key.
Awesome. Well, Sophie, thank you so much for bringing us behind the scenes really at Monopoly. And I've met a lot of your team, and I know you are doing something really special. So I'm really excited for the future. And if you are in Melbourne, drop by Monopoly Dreams. It's truly a one-of-a-kind experience. And thank you everyone who joined us for the first episode. If you've enjoyed the conversation, keep an eye out. We'll be back with more stories from leaders like Sophie, shaping the future really with data. Thank you so much, Sophie.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.